In 2015, CPS took my son, and this is my story. After giving birth to my son, I swore off drugs. I never wanted to touch another drug again. I was so grateful that I was able to leave that hospital with my son, and CPS didn't take him. So for the next 90 days, I white-knuckled it. I did everything I knew how to do to stay sober and not relapse back onto my drug of choice, which was methamphetamine and intravenous Roxys, as well as Xanax. But with no support in recovery, there was no way I was going to hold up. White-knuckling it wasn't enough. One day I went down to the gas station to get some snacks, and I seen my old drug dealer. We called him Z. He congratulated me on giving birth to my son and asked me if I wanted a Xanax. It was free on the house. In fact, he was giving me 5 of them. And I caved, and I took those Xanaxes. You're probably thinking to yourself, Xanax? I mean, just take a Xanax, girl, and chill out. But for me, taking a Xanax, it leads me down the path. It takes me right back to my drug of choice. I don't know what it is about Xanax, but it lights this like I don't give a fuck mentality up inside of me. And then I search for my drug of choice. And that's exactly what happened that night. By midnight that night, I was back at the old apartment building I lived in. And I was getting Xanax from my next door neighbor. For the next year, I struggled with my addiction. I would leave my son with his Gigi and Papa and go and disappear for 3 days to a week. When I finally would come home, they would all be so happy to see me and so upset that I kept leaving. But I didn't want to be high around my son, so that's why I would leave. 2 days before my son's first birthday, it was July 2nd, Child Protective Services showed up on my door. They told me I needed to submit to a drug test and that if I didn't, then they would call the police and that the police would come and take my son. So I drove down to their office and I gave them a drug test. And I admitted to them that I was struggling with addiction and that I wanted to get help because I truly thought that's what they were going to do, was help me. The next day they showed up at my house and told me and my husband that I had to give custody to them, that I had to bring my son to them with all his bags packed. I said, well, can he go with his grandmother and grandfather? They said, you're going to have to fill out paperwork for that. So we went straight down to their office and filled out the paperwork. I couldn't stay for the result. I had to go into treatment right away. So I left the office and asked the caseworker, please take me to a detox center. Take me to detox now. And she took me to a detox right down the street and dropped me off. Later on that night, I got a phone call from my mother and father-in-law. And they told me that CPS had denied them, that they were too old to have custody of my son. They were 60 years old and in great shape. If you want to hear more of my story, let me know.